All right, Krystal, what's on your radar?
Well, many Democrats suffered a real blow yesterday when their new resistance hero Mitt Romney sided with the rest of the GOP caucus by and large to back a speedy vote to replace Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Only recently, Mitt had thrilled them with his vote to convict Donald Trump for the high-level bureaucratic imbroglio of Ukraine-gate. Somehow, they memory hold his entire life and career up to that point, in which he did things like pioneer new ways to make money destroying people's lives through private equity, pick austerity boy wonder Paul Ryan as his running mate, and let slip his true thoughts about the American working class to a room full of rich donors.
There are 47% of the people who will vote for the president no matter what. All right, there are 47% who are with him, who are dependent upon government, who believe that they are victims, who believe that government has a responsibility to care for them, who believe that they're entitled to health care, to food, to housing, to you name it. It's an entitlement, and the government should give it to them.
So while Mitt Romney may have found Donald Trump's lowbrow antics distasteful, the Supreme Court really isn't about Donald Trump. It's about maintaining power for conservative right in America that can no longer or will no longer compete for an actual majority and preserving the great American plutocracy. In the end, Romney stayed true to his class and maintained his status as a top-class warrior for the rich. Of course, in a way, all of this high drama about the Supreme Court is really a kind of mass delusion. The truth is, the Supreme Court does not have to be nearly this important, and only remains so through a tacit agreement between Democrats and Republicans. Both parties, for somewhat different reasons, find it advantageous to allow a sort of judicial supremacy that renders the legislative branch a sad, helpless stepchild in our supposedly co-equal three branches of government. And if there's one thing we all know, it's that below the surface of many of the fiercest battles lies a quiet, elite, bipartisan consensus. And if there's another thing we know, it's that those areas of elite bipartisan consensus should terrify you. So what do I mean here when I say that Supreme Court does not have to be this important and really should not be this important? Well, first of all, rather than lawmakers expecting the Supreme Court to make all the hard decisions and throwing up their hands that there's nothing they can do because the court has spoken, they could actually legislate. Take the upcoming healthcare ruling that the Biden team is touting, which could potentially upend Obamacare. So the Biden team is absolutely correct that such an outcome would be catastrophic for millions. According to the New York Times, the 133 million Americans with pre-existing conditions will now be in danger of not being able to buy healthcare at all, or at the very least, seeing costs skyrocket. That includes the roughly 7 million Americans who got coronavirus and now count as having a pre-existing condition. Somewhere around 21 million Americans would lose health insurance altogether. Health insurers would again be allowed to put lifetime caps on coverage so that if you end up with an expensive or a catastrophic condition, you are much more likely to end up as one of the millions who have been financially ruined by medical expenses. Our healthcare system as it stands is unfathomably barbaric. Rolling back the protections and subsidies of Obamacare would cause an additional outrageous amount of misery, sickness, and death. What Democrats are less likely to tell you, though, is that this fate could be avoided by a relatively straightforward one-line amendment to the original ACA law. So you see, the entire court case against the ACA is based on questions around the constitutionality of the so-called individual mandate. When the law was written, the individual mandate was put in because analysts believed that it was necessary for the law to function properly and avoid what they called a death spiral. Well, President Trump, through executive action, already reduced the individual mandate penalty to $0, effectively killing it, and that actually hasn't really made a difference for the operation of the law. As John Walker points out over at the American Prospect, Pelosi could simply attach a one-line amendment officially ending the individual mandate to a must-pass bill, and voila, the court challenge to Obamacare is effectively over. Lucky for us, just such a must-pass bill, the continuing resolution to fund the government, is in the offing right now to prevent an October 1 government shutdown. I don't even know that the Republicans would put up that much of a fight because as much as they love posturing about Obamacare, they've got to know that actually kicking millions off of health insurance would be a total political disaster for them. But don't expect Democrats to do anything to avoid this utterly avoidable tragedy because for them, they see it as a nice little campaign issue to run on. But even if this focus on dealing with the fallout from potential SCOTUS decisions buys into the necessity of our current version of the Supreme Court, as many have pointed out, the number of justices on the court is not written into the Constitution. It could easily be changed by legislation. Would court packing inevitably lead to a political tit for tat in which the next time Republicans are in charge, they up the number of justices in retaliation, thus effectively ending any pretense of the court as a nonpartisan body? Yes, Absolutely, that is likely to happen. Such a loss of legitimacy would surely hobble the court. But let's be honest, the court, as an above-the-fray nonpartisan institution, died sometime in the W. Bush administration. May as well make it absolutely plain. And by the way, I don't really mind the court being hobbled. Ryan Cooper at The Week and Matt Karp at Jacobin, who's in the show today, by the way, suggest a potentially even more fundamental rethinking of the court. So in Cooper's words, just ignore them. He quotes Matt Brunig here saying that all the president has to do is assert that Supreme Court rulings about constitutionality are merely advisory and non-binding, that Marbury was wrongly decided, and that the constitutional document says absolutely nothing about the Supreme Court having this power. Think about it this way. If this court really ends up ruling in an outrageously immoral and unconstitutional way, as they did, for example, in the Dred Scott case, which infamously declared that no Black American could ever be a citizen, should a president really just accept such a thing? Abraham Lincoln did not. He just ignored them. And again, nowhere in the Constitution does it say that he should have done otherwise. But for now, of course, Democrats and Republicans are happy to be locked in their little mutually beneficial war dance, using court battles to gin up their base, protect corporate interests, and have one more ready-made excuse for why they are so damn impotent. You can imagine a future Joe Biden administration saying, gee, we wanted to do a big FDR-style program, but it would get struck down by the courts. So instead, we're just going to project Black Lives Matter on the front of the White House. The Supreme Court is just one more block in their impenetrable wall of excuses for not being better. And Sagar, you've been pointing this out as well. Matt Stoller's been pointing it out. You know, the media goes instantly on the Supreme Court conversation to Roe v. Wade. Look, it's important. It's important to a lot of people on both sides. I get it. They never, ever talk about corporate power and how much power the Supreme Court has in determining and dictating corporate power in our lives. And by the way, we haven't heard anything from any politician about this either, including the ones on the so-called populist right who claim to care about these things. They haven't voiced any concern about it. No one does the work to dig into what it actually is going to mean. And the truth of the matter is that even though both sides protest and pretend like, you know, on the right, they're like, oh, the unaccountable federal judges when it's inconvenient for them. On the left, they complain about the same thing now. The truth is that they like not having power because it lets them off the hook.
They love the system. For example, that thing you pointed out about Nancy Pelosi and the individual mandate or any of the...
It's not outrageous.
Well, but the thing is they love the fight. Mm-hmm. They want it to be in the court so they can posture against it.
Yes.
And the Republicans also want it to be in the court so they don't have to actually vote against the individual mandate, even though many of them would have, and they've repealed it so many times fakely under the Obama administration. They love to kick this stuff to the courts to make sure that they make it existential for you, and they can go out and they can say, you have to vote for me so I can vote for this guy who goes on the court, and he will do what you want, but not me, even though that's my job. That's actually what drives me the most insane about this entire thing. And yeah, you're right. On the litmus test, nobody cares. Nobody is even talking about it. It's all culture all the time. It's just like culture war supremacy in this country, and nothing's ever going to get solved.
Yeah.
How's it worked for the last 40 years? Has it worked out well? I mean, are we better off because we've all gone in on this? I'd also point to the right and say we mostly lost whenever we mostly did that. So, hey, if you actually want to win the culture war, then, you know, there are some certain things that I would advise you to do. I just think that it's so foolish the way that they talk and the way that they look at this, and they do not understand what damage they are doing to their own, to their own jobs and their own power and legitimacy in the eyes of the people.
That ACA thing, to me, it's the perfect example.
Yeah.
It would take a one-line amendment, but Democrats won't do it. And by the way, they passed in the House the CR, the continuing resolution last night. That idea of putting it into that is completely off the table. Not that I ever expected them to do it before. And they're right to say the Republicans are worse, right? They've been trying to dismantle Obamacare. Not that I even think Obamacare is like that great. I think that it has a lot of problems and has been incredibly problematic and has cemented into place this corporate employer-based health insurance system. But all that being said, these protections for millions of Americans are incredibly real. If Democrats actually really cared about the substance of that, they would fight tooth and nail to get that amendment through. The individual mandate is already effectively dead. Just a officially make it so. Republicans have been railing against the individual mandate forever. Call their bluff and say, look, you hate this thing. Join with us to get it passed and make it an issue. Fight to actually get this done. But they won't do it because they think it's a good electoral issue for them. And that's kind of disgusting.
Yeah, I mean, they're playing pawns with people's lives as much as Republicans are, right? I mean, and that's really what it's all about, which is that they don't care. They just want to use them as chits so they can preserve their power, win elections, and then eventually do whatever it is they're going to do. Again, I ask, what would a Joe Biden administration actually do? There ain't going to be no FDR-style thing to even strike down.
Oh, well, they would love to, but, the courts, so why bother even to try?
Go read how FDR handled that himself.
Indeed.
Didn't care about the courts.
All right, Sagar, looking forward to your radar. That's next.